Welcome, welcome to Artists in Conversation, Parents as Artists, Artists as Parents. I'm Pirronne Yousefzadeh. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Associate Artistic Director at Playwrights Center. Zooming to you from my humble home here in Minneapolis, which is the ancestral lands of the Dakota people and the Anishinaabe Ojibwe people. I want to first just take a moment to allow our amazing panel to introduce themselves. So, if folks, if you can give your names, your pronouns, if you'd like to share them, and then a little bit about your work as an artist. Whitney, can I start with you?
Usually I'm last because of the whole W thing, but this is refreshing. Hi everybody, I'm Whitney Rowland. I use she, her pronouns. Typically, I'm a playwright. I come from a playwriting and a screenwriting background for the most part. I went to school at Carnegie Mellon. I got an MFA there in dramatic writing at the School of Drama. My plays tend to be dark comedies, dramas with a little hint of sort of magical, surrealist elements. And then my day job, I write for a video game studio, and I've written for mostly action RPG titles. And I have a game coming up next week, so go buy Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is coming out next week. And that's it. That's sort of my mix. I have my nighttime playwriting gig and I have my daytime game writing gig. And that is my creative life. I also dabble in watercolor, but I'm not very good at it, and that's kind of the point, and I love it.
Awesome. Christina, can I ask
Sure.
you next?
Yes. Hi, I'm Cristina Luzárraga. I'm a playwright based in New Jersey right now. Um, I I don't know if this is a follow-up question, but I'll explain it now. I have a 3-year-old and a 2-month-old. So my day job right now is keeping those kids alive and happy. I tend to write dark comedies as well, usually centered on women. And more recently, usually centered on mothers. And I was a McKnight and a Jerome Fellow, so I started at the Playwrights Center, and more recently moved to New Jersey from Minneapolis.
Great. Thank you. And last but not least, Nathan.
Hi, I'm Nathan Yungerberg. I'm a playwright. I'm from Minneapolis, but I have been living in New York for 20 years now this year. I live in Brooklyn. Um, I would consider myself an Afro-surrealist. My plays are really rooted in like Black stories that really showcase layers of humanity. I really enjoy writing a lot of strong female characters and also with a specific focus on mature Black female characters is something that's really interesting to me. And he, him, his. I think that's it. Did I forget anything?
That's great. That's great. Well, thanks, y'all. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. And we have I have some questions for our amazing panel of artists, but we will also have some time for Q&A. So I just want to encourage folks who are attending, if you have a question and you want to use the Q&A function, and pop it in there, we will have some time towards the end to hopefully answer some of your questions. But to get us going, I'd love to hear each of you talk a little bit about how you came to the decision to become parents and how that was situated within your artistic trajectories. And of course, acknowledging also that, for those of you who have multiple kids, there might be slightly different answers there. And any one of you can take this question first, but would love to just sort of talk about sort of how parenting entered into your life.
I can start. Um, and I get asked that question all the time. And I've wanted kids since I was probably 10 years old. Um, as a proud Gen Xer, like my sister and I were babysitting like newborns when we were 10. I don't know why that was ever a thing. I wouldn't even let a 13-year-old watch my kids now. Um, and as I grew older, I just always thought that it was something it was just like a given. I grew up in a two-parent household. I have two siblings. I'm gay, and so once I kind of came more into my sexuality, it was always a matter of like, how will that happen? Things were different. I'm in my early 50s, so things were way different back in the day when I came out. Like adoption for gay people wasn't legal in all states. Gay marriage wasn't a thing. So having access to that happy ending wasn't really a reality for me and a lot of the people that I know. Um, and then I think I always thought I was going to do it with a partner. But as I got into my late 40s, and then my biological clock started ticking, because I think we as men have them too in a different way. I was like, dang, I'm gonna be 50 soon. Like I need to, it's like kind of a now or never thing. And so I decided to do it on my own against um the discouraging shouts of my Greek chorus that everyone was saying, "Don't do it. You can't do it alone. You can't do it alone." And I did. And I went through the foster to adopt program in New York and did not want a baby. And I ended up with a newborn who was 10 days old, who I adopted in 2022. She's going to be 6 this summer. And then a year and a half in, they said that the mom and dad were pregnant with another baby and they were going to be calling me first. And I said, no, you're not. But I ultimately ended up taking him too. And so now I have a 4-year-old son and I've really got my hands full. So that's my story.
That's
And
amazing.
it is amazing. And I like almost started crying when you said you have known you wanted to be a parent since you were 10. Can you talk just a little bit more about sort of where you were artistically at the time that you made the decision to adopt?
Yeah, I feel like so I was 47, 48 when I really decided to do it. 48 when I really jumped into it. My daughter was placed in my home. I think at that point, I've been writing since I started late. I think I started when I was 38 or 39. So I'd been in the game for like a decade, and I think I was at that point where I really felt kind of the traction going, and I had my first like big world premiere that was, slated for production in October of the year that I became a father. And there was a lot of this kind of stuff going on in my life. So it was a very interesting moment to enter into this parenting realm.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'll jump in. Mine doesn't compare. I just have one. I have a 5-year-old son. And when I made the decision, it was sort of a reverse engineering decision because I wasn't sure if I wanted to have kids or not. When I was young, I wanted them, but as I grew older, I wasn't sure if that was like cultural programming or if that was like really my want. So I progressed through that, and then eventually I asked myself, like, okay, if I'm on my deathbed, let's say I'm lucky and I'm 105 and like grumpy and cozy little, person in a blanket. Like, do I want to look back and wish that I'd had children and had that experience? And in that moment, when I put myself there, I was like, yes, I do. And so I was like, okay, well then it's about making time there because there's never a right time to do it. There's never going to be a right time. If you try to save up your money or save up your health or save up your time or wait for some green flag to go, like it's never going to happen. So and also you don't have any control over how it works out for you or if it works out for you, right? So there's so many uncertainties. And so between the realization that I did want children and the fact that my artistic career wasn't really taking off, not in a bad way, but things were out there, people were interested, but like nothing was really launching. And so it was like, well, I'm already adrift in uncertainties. Like, why not add more difficulty? Like, why not? And I'm older too. I'm an older mom. I had my baby at 37. I thought I had him at 38, but I forgot my birth year. And I thought I was a year older than I was for an entire year, which really confused the doctors. But I was 37. Yeah, so I don't know. I like maybe because I came to it from a very conscious place. That helped me a lot. And then ironically, like as soon as I got pregnant, things started moving in my artistic life too. Like I was getting productions and things. So I don't know, my journey as a parent and my journey as a like a right in line with COVID. So, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But yeah, no, that was sort of my decision, and I have no regrets. I mean, I wish COVID hadn't happened. Like it was very difficult to be a parent during that period of time. But yeah, no, I now the two things are so intermeshed. Like my ability to carve out time for my practice and um, my life as a mom and my life as a professional artist are now completely intertwined because of just the timeline and the way they developed.
I similarly to Nathan always wanted to be a parent. It really predates being a writer or being interested in theater. So if I had was forced to choose, I would have picked a mom over being a writer. Thankfully, I don't really have to choose, although yes, we do 1,000 times a day, which I'm sure we'll discuss. Um, and I remember I had my Jerome interview, and I was asked about my 5-year plan, and I said I want to be a mom. And after that interview, I felt like, oh shoot, that was like the worst thing to say in an interview. Why would you ever say that? Like no one, what? And thankfully I became a Jerome Fellow, and I mean, to the Playwright Center's credit, Jeremy Cohen and the later was like, no, we love that. Like you should be frank about your desires and wants. And the Playwright Center, to their credit, is very much invested in uh, developing artists as people and not just as page generators, you know. So I feel very grateful that the Playwright Center was like, yeah, that's cool. Jump on board. And later, when I became a McKnight Fellow a couple of years later, I learned I was pregnant shortly after getting that, and I was like, oh no, oh the timing here is not good because I had all these plans to write like 1,000 plays in the next year, and now how am I going to do that? And they're going to feel like I betrayed them, and or that I feel like I've left, squandered this opportunity. And yeah, I did not write 1,000 plays that year. I maybe wrote one. I was hung up on morning sickness like the entire time. It was a pretty brutal pregnancy. And again, the Playwright Center, to their credit, were very much like, yeah, we gave you the fellowship to be a person, like the writing is a bonus, but like it's here to support you as a person. And this right now, you're a person who's gestating a baby, and that's consuming most of your creative energy. So, so be it. So I'm just again so grateful that the Playwright Center never made me feel like awkward about the timing of that, because it wasn't intentional. I thought my husband and I thought we would like wait another year or two. But it came when it came. And sort of similar to Whitney, like um I feel like things were starting to build traction, and then the pandemic happened, and then it felt like any progress I had made in my career was just like receded. And so I was like, now's not a bad time. Everyone's sort of in creative hibernation. Why not? My daughter was born sort of in 2022, I guess the end of the pandemic, however we're defining it. And so yeah, I have a 3-year-old, and now I have a 2-month-old. And again, the timing, we didn't quite, I don't know. He came when he came, and we've just been rolling with it. And uh, I wish the timing were different? Yes and no. It's kind of like whatever. Sure, I wish I had all these prestigious career achievements and milestones hit by now, but it's just going to have to be part of the journey. So yeah, that's where I stand.
Yeah, heard. I sometimes wish I still had the lower back I had in my 20s, but I had my daughter when I was almost 41. So anyway, I keep the chiropractor well compensated these days. Um, uh, there's a lot to talk about, and thank you all so much for sharing. And I also just want to acknowledge that just like by virtue of the topic that we're discussing, there is a vulnerability in what we're talking about tonight. So I just want to thank you for your vulnerability and for your honesty and all of that. Um, I'm curious to hear about sort of how the parent part of you fuels the artist part of you, how the artist fuels the parent, shapes you as a parent. And Cristina, you had mentioned that you're writing more mothers lately, and so I'm, wondering also about how it might be shaping some of the narratives that you're interested in, the stories you want to tell. And yeah, I know for me, as a director and a single mom by choice, there's definitely a way those two selves are talking to each other all the time. And so I'm curious to hear how that lives within each of you. And anyone can start.
I'll go. Um, I feel like stories both, I feel like when I became a mother, some stories opened up to me in a new way, both stories that I create and stories I consume. Like things just resonated differently, when I had that lived experience. And there was like a different truth that I could tap into just from a different set of experiences. But I also felt like, and I hate this, but there were certain stories now that are closed off to me that I can't handle yet. And maybe when my son gets older, and maybe as I get further away from this stage in our lives. But I remember specifically there was a book, a very popular book, and I still haven't read it, the fifth season. And every time, this is not a spoiler, everyone, because it's in the first like 3 pages, but in the very beginning of the book, a character son dies, and she's like emoting over it. She's having this moment, and every time I read it, I'm like, nope, nope, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. And I hate that about myself, but it's also, I know that it's something very true. It's a new experience for myself. Um, but yeah, I think that's, for me, that was one of the biggest changes, was the way that I tapped into art, especially that I'm consuming. And then in my own work, I, to be honest, I haven't written a ton of plays since I've dabbled. I've written short plays, but I haven't written a lot of like meaty, like full length plays or anything. I feel like my attention span has shortened, my ability to focus and my literal free time has shortened, and so focusing on short form things was a way that I could accomplish something and alleviate the mom guilt. I could like see something all the way through. Luckily, I'm a McKnight Fellow this year, and that has been an unbelievable gift to give me, to like literally buy the time and the space away from my family, to help me secure the focus that I need to write some of those longer form things. And in doing that, I've definitely written more mothers, more pregnant women, more people that are, I don't know, part of the journey that now I understand on a deeper level.
I just want to say I'm totally with you on like the stories that you can't quite touch, right? And I have discovered that I have a really hard time with like any sort of gore or violence on stage that like feels, or on screen that feel, I mean, especially if like if it's any way implied that like a child is in danger, I cannot watch it. I can't.
And
So
that stuff didn't bother me before. Like it's kind of amazing how much of a visceral reaction it triggers in me now when we hit those.
totally, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Nathan, Christina, how do you see these two sides of you feeding each other? Nathan, I believe you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I can go. Yeah, people always tell me all the time that I need to write about this, and I just have no interest in it at all right now. Like I feel like there's just such a separation between my home life and my work life. And it may be too because those two really battle against each other now. Because before, like I was single and I had this very hardcore writing schedule where like even if I didn't have a deadline for anything, like every day, a minimum of 3 hours from 9 to noon, like clockwork, 7 days a week, I was writing. And obviously now that doesn't happen like ever unless I have a deadline for something and then I can't do it on the weekends. So I think there is a part of me that I'll say it. I just like to be transparent. Like there's a part of my old self, I think, that resents the intrusion into my private time. Resent them, but I resent this new reality. And so I maybe don't like, I'm not interested in writing about it because it's like when I'm writing my other stuff, it's like I can escape into a fantasy world where this other thing, these other things, beautiful things don't exist. What I will say though is that from the jump, whole parenting layer in my life added so much more intrigue and depth to my artist statements. And I always struggled with those before. And it wasn't until I became a parent that I'm sure there were other things at play, but I know that that was a really huge shift for me, being able to talk about the experience of being a parent. And also how I think it's given me more, compassion and depth as a human being, which obviously, filters into my writing. But again, just baseline, like people I actually think people really like to hear about it. And especially from a single parent perspective, I feel like it's enabled me to write about myself with more ease and authenticity. And then I think it's given me a little bit more of an edge, whereas before I felt like I didn't really have anything to talk about, even though, had been on the planet for almost 50 years. It gave me something really um interesting to add to the pot. Um, and I love to talk about it because I love my kids. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I will say similar to Nathan, I think I want to not write about parenthood, and yet I can't help myself. Like it just keeps creeping into every play. I think I very much want to protect that private time, that creative energy, and and um and yet I just can't, like mentally and physically it just encroaches. And so I'm just sort of rolling with it. Like children and parents are going to find their way into my work now, no matter what it seems like, at least in this season of life. I think the biggest difference now is I I've experienced such depth of emotion, which sounds so cliche, as if people who aren't parents can't experience them. I know all that, but I'll tell my husband sometimes, like, I love my kids so much, I need to like lie down and swoon. It's like I need a fainting couch. Like I'm just so overcome, which is a new feeling for me. I have never felt so viscerally like in love, and how to dramatize that, because that's an intense emotion, but it's not very interesting on stage necessarily. So that's something that is like kind of always percolating. Like how do I bottle that intelligent women the last 10 15 years about motherhood, and how can we make it dramatic, because it's an emotion, but it's not, people are not necessarily captivated by that as mothers are otherwise, and I understand why. So it's a dilemma that I haven't solved. It's like a how to square that circle. I don't know, but it's something that I think about all the time, because here's this thing that I feel so intensely, and yet I don't know how to put it on stage in a way that I would find dramatically satisfying. Um, and hopefully one day I'll sort of crack that. But uh, the other thing I think that is new in my writing is I am more sentimental. I think I always have sort of a knee-jerk, like arch acerbic way of looking at things. And since having children, I'm more inclined to like want to incorporate into a play some more heart as opposed to just intellect. So that is maybe where that intensity of emotion is bleeding through these moments on stage that I want to see, even if it's not a weepy drama about a mom who loses her kid. I need at least a few moments on stage that feel really emotionally true in a way that before I kind of could have put by the wayside. So those I'd say are the biggest changes as of yet.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I want to ask a question that actually isn't in the outline, but w sort of dovetails to it, which is, obviously, the writers can be very particular about like their writing practice, and we know that like with children, there is a lot that happens outside of your control. Case in point, the daycare cold that I have for this conversation, quite fittingly. So I'm just wondering about like how you each navigate or think about the like unpredictability of it all, and the like the day to day, like we don't like, I would like tomorrow to be a writing day, but if I have to keep my kid home from school, like, how do you sort of think about the give and take of that, and the ways in which like as parents we have less control over our time than we did before becoming parents.
I
I,
can.
oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. You sure? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Um, yeah, that's a thing. Like that's a big thing, like a huge thing. I think though for me, like when when I finally made, because, with adoption, it's so calculated and it's different than, birthing a child, obviously. When I finally made the decision to do it after all that negative talk, which I finally realized was just kind of like echoing my own concerns on the inside, I remember I was in my writer's room that I had cleared out. I have a two-bedroom apartment and it was empty. I was kind of preparing for this and I thought, I got this. I like when you foster, like the city pays for daycare and like I thought, because people are like, you're never gonna be able to write again. I said, no, like why would I not be able to? And I was plotting all this stuff out almost to the point that it was like this crystalline kind of thing floating in the air outside of the window. And then all of a sudden, it was like a wrench got thrown into it, like in slow motion, and all the glass just fell. And then I knew at that moment that I was ready to do it because I knew that I was ready to surrender to whatever was going to happen, and that any plan that I came up with would just be like, you know. And that's kind of what it is. Like we just roll with the punches, and I think on one hand, it can be extremely stressful and extremely frustrating, especially when, you've got a deadline. You're like, okay, I've got all this time lined up. They're going to be at school. And then all of a sudden there's a fever, or there's some half day thing that I didn't know about and I can't get a sitter. But then you just jump into action. And I think I would have to say that this experience has turned me into, as I'm sure I would consider all of us and all parents, like a level above a superhero. I kind of want to write a story about that because it's beyond superhero dumb. It's something else. And I was always really good with time management, but I have become like someone could hire me to like, work with time management because whereas before, like I couldn't write at night, I couldn't do that, like I could only write from 9 until 12. And now I just do it when and I've gotten to the point where if they're here and I have a deadline, I just go into that zone and I don't know how they're screaming and fighting and coming in and bother and we just make it happen because we have no choice.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. Going off of the chaos, I feel like sometimes when you're in that mode, it's hard to know what you did, but only looking back that you did it. It's like you tap into some, I don't know, animal moment where somehow you get the energy, you get the time, you get the focus, and you manage to get it done. But something else you said was the idea that you were packing up this second room. I remember specifically, I had to pack up my office to make room for the nursery. And I was like, as I'm packing, I was like, this is not a metaphor. This is not a metaphor. This is come back out. It's just a matter of our small ass house. It's fine. And it did. Okay, it's over here now. It's fine. Um, but the probably the greatest piece of advice I got, probably for any parent, this is good advice, was to take a look around and choose something that's going to fall. Like make a choice because you can't do it all set of responsibilities on top of our normal lives, right? We have to preserve this creative art. We have to keep this spark going. We have to keep working on, or maybe we're in like an intake mode and we have to keep reading or consuming or whatever it is, but we have like a whole extra job that we are maintaining. And so instead of looking around the house and seeing the laundry piled up and being overcome with guilt every time you walk by, like, oh, I should do that. I should fold that. Instead, you have chosen the laundry for the week. The laundry is the thing that you will not do. It will sit there. And so then every time you walk into a room and you see that pile of laundry, instead of feeling guilty, it is a sign of self-care, right? It is a sign that you're taking time for your art. And that is the thing you are sacrificing this week. Maybe the next week you don't cook as much and you eat out more and you see those receipts piling up but no guilt because this is the thing that's falling that you are letting drop to make time for your practice. And like that was huge for me because I love to feel guilty about everything. And I remember right after I had the baby, I thought, I can do everything. I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't even remember to take my pills. I couldn't remember. I didn't know what day it was. It's like I could barely take care of myself as a human. And so I don't know, having really ingraining that and then letting that continue because now my son's 5. It's not quite the same situation, like he can do a lot of things for himself now, but still having that idea of like, okay, it's a busy week. This is the thing that's going to fall. I choose to let it fall is like a reminder for myself that it's okay to take that time.
Whitney, I love that. And I think you just like healed something in me as you said that. And I just want to say thank you. And I might just order myself some dinner tonight for that very reason. Christina, what do you think?
I feel like lately I haven't been embracing the term hiatus because I have a 2-month-old and I'm like, I'm on hiatus from writing. I'm not quitting writing, but I am on an indefinite hiatus. And it's may not map cleanly with a 3-month maternity leave. It's going to be fits and starts of like whatever, the month of February, nothing got done because there was just, so many stomach bugs or whatever. You just kind of have like just writing it off as that was a month of hiatus. For whatever reason, that word like gives me peace as opposed to like I quit or I failed or something. It's just I am taking a seasonal break for whatever reason. And that I've had to embrace that during the pregnancies because I've just been so both times really consumed by nausea and exhaustion and just depression and just no desire to write really, or very little. I mean, it would come in sort of fits and starts. I think I similarly to Nathan, like used to have a kind of pretty regimented writing practice, and I was really proud of that because it took me a while to get to that. I'd always, for most of my life, had been writing in fits and starts, and I felt so proud of myself that I had suddenly like developed something healthy and sustainable. And then I got pregnant and all like is going to be a fits and starts sleepless night kind of thing, and I squeeze it in where I can, and it's not super healthy and sustainable, but it's just going to have to track like this as opposed to a steady plateau, and hopefully one day there will be more equilibrium, but for now it's just a roller coaster.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all. And just want to just remind our attendees that we will be starting some Q&A in a little while here. So I see we have one question in the Q&A, but we can definitely take some more. So feel free to pop those in there as we continue the conversation. Um, sort of pivoting now to thinking about how institutions can support you. Um, love to hear folks like expand a little bit upon some of the challenges of being a parent artist parent, and what are some of the best practices you've experienced, or some of the um, sort of uh, counter examples you've experienced that could tell you, and we don't have to name names or drag anybody here, but that you would love to see that sort of inform what you would love to see from theaters and institutions in terms of how you're supported as an artist.
I'll go. I don't have a ton of examples, but one that's popping up to mind is before COVID, I had a production and I was still pumping milk. I had just had a baby, like, I don't know. I think I flew down. This is so crazy to think about. I think I flew down when he was like 8 weeks old or 6 weeks old. And then yeah, it was nuts. Why did I do that? It's one of those things where you think back and you're like, how did I, how did I do that? But yes, I took him with me and then I had help. And one of the things they did that was wonderful was I had a little room at the theater and it was the paint room at the theater itself, but sorry, at the theater company, I had like a little room, and then at the theater location, I had like a little paint room. But I had a private room that I could pump in, and it had an outlet, and they had like set it up so that I had access to like water and all sorts of things, because anyone who's ever done breastfeeding or pumping or anything like that knows it is frequent, and the schedule is not negotiable. It is physically not negotiable. You're dealing with something outside of your control on so many levels. And so it was really lovely that they did that. And at one point during the tech, I really wanted to be out there, and so they they situated me up in the top row with like a tent over me, and I'm like, I'm like watching for the back row pumping, and everyone was very cool with it, and it was nice. They kept me involved. They were constantly making sure I had enough food and enough to drink, and they were just really thoughtful about that. Also, they were very relaxed. There was no gross out element, because it's like it's not something I can help, and I'd like to feed my child. So yeah. So having that like little private place, even if it's like a nice clean bathroom with a desk in it or something, I think is really great with a plug. It's just very thoughtful. So those are the things I'm thinking of first.
Great. That's helpful.
I'm struggling to think of anything other than just money. Money for childcare. And every theater is strapped more than ever. So it's just and parents are strapped. So unfortunately it's like, no, I need money to pay a babysitter. Can you help me there? And thankfully there are grants that can be applied for. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from your, ticket sales. And I would hope the theaters would tap into those. Like, please apply for those grants because they do matter a lot.
Yeah, I would have to second that. It's like childcare was something that I had heard of before as being a burden, but oh my God, it is, it's just unbelievable. Even to the point of like, as a theater goer, like someone will say, "Oh, I've got a comp, like you won't have to pay for anything." I'm like, "Yeah, but like," and then it's, $150 later, $200 to get a sitter. Like it's just, and people don't know. Like if you don't know, you don't know. But Playwright Center, you all have been extremely accommodating for me regarding assistance with that for when I have to go there. Because I have two and I'm a single parent, like I can't bring I mean I could bring them with and then have people watch them there, but it's easiest for me if I can leave them here and then I have to get someone to watch them overnight and like that can it gets really expensive. Um uh National Black Theater, who I've been doing a residency for the last 3 years, has also been really accommodating with that. And they usually will bring it up sometimes before I even do, because a lot of people don't, if they don't have kids, like they just don't think about it. And there have been several times with other things where people are just, throwing out things like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this between 3 and 6. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like it's just, and it's almost like my brain starts to burn because I'm like, I start calculating, and then like 5 days in a row and I start calculating all those hours times like $30. And I'm just like, so I would have to say that is a huge thing.
Yeah. I co-sign that strongly. And I think also like what we're talking about is about the labor of childcare being made visible as opposed to, an assumption that we can invisibilize it, that there is another person who can do it and will do it for free. And especially for those of us who are single parents like you and me, Nathan, like that idea of I think can be a very sort of like heteronormative idea and assumption. Um, uh, and 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 I think it's also unfair to artists who are partnered, parents, because like we all know that in the year of our Lord 2025, like it takes a significant amount of money to raise children. And so the assumption that the other parent can just take it, I think is also a little bit of a stretch. Whitney, I saw you unmuted before. I felt like I had to passionately
No, I loved
everything
it.
Nathan had to say, but yeah.
Yeah, no, the only other thing I wanted to add to it is just grace, like ha a theater that understands that even someone like me who is obsessed with being on time and being early, like in the parenting days, there's so many things I don't have control over or things shift, and so having like true grace about that kind of thing and understanding that parent artists have a particular set of priorities that are not always flexible, I think is super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Grace for adorable cameos. Hi. Um, my daughter has been making numerous entrances into the kitchen with the babysitter, and I don't know what snacks she's saying she gets to have, but that's what's happening tonight.
my husband has texted me that they are on their way back from Taco Tuesday and that my son is insisting on ringing the doorbell and making an entrance. So I'm looking forward to
Amazing.
that any minute.
Amazing. We love that. We love that. Um, yeah, I think that what you said about grace really resonates for me, as well as just like I think asking parents what they need. And that's like in the best experiences I've had, there's been the question, there's been because I think that also even folks who have kids, if their kids are much older, there is like a little bit of an amnesia, I think, that sets in around like what some of the needs are really early on, or what some of the sort of particulars of the schedule are, where like you sort of, I mean, I still vividly remember like the pumping around the clock and the like, washing pump parts like it was my job because it was, infancy. But I think that, there are times I've encountered leaders who have children, but their children are older. And so like, they're teenagers, they're in college. And so like they just don't quite have the sort of immediate access to some of those like particular factors that make it um just like a different kind of challenge when doing artistic work with like a very tiny human who say doesn't know how to use the bathroom yet.
Or when people pop in and they're like, "Hey, let's go grab a drink after, or let's go get some dinner." And you're like, "Well, absolutely not." Like, not a chance. If it's not on my Google Calendar and verified 3 times over, it's really not going to happen.
Yeah, you need to give me 7 to 10 business days for any drink or meal you would like us to share. Yes, yes. Um, once again, just want to encourage folks to put questions in the Q&A, but we do have one to start with, and I have a feeling I know the answer to this question, at least to some extent, but or at least for me, the question is, do you ever feel guilty when you choose a writing opportunity or a gig over your child? Like, is it ever possible to do it all? And I guess maybe I'll offer like a framing of how do you navigate the periods of like greater artistic activity where you might not be present as much, or where you might not be doing
Sure.
that time. How do you sort of grapple with those feelings of guilt that may come up?
I'll jump in. This is probably not the answer you're expecting. I do not think we can do it all, right? Like I said, I feel like you have to choose what drops. But I have actually never felt guilty about those things. And maybe it is different because my husband and I like sort of made a pact when we got together a zillion years ago that we were always going to sort of fiercely perfect timing. That we were all gonna like fiercely protect our core selves, like the things that were really important to us. And so when I make the choice to go off and do these writing things, hi, yeah, come on in.
We heard the doorbell was
Oh yeah.
yeah, cause
So when I'm gonna pass to someone else for a moment.
I can try. Like I said, we're giving them the real show tonight. I wouldn't say that my career has yet reached a level where we all know people who just jump from project to project to like I'm not at that point, right?
Sleep.
So when I go out of town for something or go to Playwrights Center for a week, it's like a one time out of like a year that I do something like that. So I don't really have any experience with that, but I can definitely say that I jump at the opportunity to go away by myself because I really prioritize my self-care and time for myself to focus on my craft and whatnot. I don't know, in a year or two, if things shift with my career, then I may have a different perspective because I've not had to like turn anything down because I had to choose my kids so.
My son has been whisked away. To finish what I was gonna say, um, I feel like I am a better parent when I am artistically fulfilled as well. I feel like I am my best self when I have that energy to bring to this table, when I've sort of worked that out. And it's fueled my parenting in a different way too, where I paint with my son, I draw with my son, we write books together, we're very creative together. And so I don't know, I feel like whenever I can go away for that opportunity, I feel like it's a moment for my child to see me living a full life, that he doesn't think I'm ignoring him. He gets to see like mama go off and do something that really means something to her. And I would rather I I've never gotten the sense that he feels, I mean, my cat certainly gets angry at me, but my child seems proud and happy and engaged and seems to understand and get excited about these things versus feeling, shunned or second. Yeah.
Yeah, I similarly try to take the long view of hopefully in 10, 15, 20 years, my 2-month-old, because he certainly can't understand now, will appreciate um, that, that I needed to do this for myself and for my career, and that it was not a selfish decision so much as for the family at large. But I really take solace in reading about other, particularly mothers, and how they've handled it. Like one book I recommend all the time is Baby on the Fire Escape by Julie Phillips. And it's about various mother artists and how they've tried to juggle it all. And the title comes from Alice Neal, the painter. Her in-laws claimed that she was sticking her baby on the fire escape so she could paint, and then this was like a disputed thing in their family about whether this was true or not. But it's like kind of an interesting metaphor of like where's the baby on your fire escape right now. So I like reading about women, particularly women who've been mother artists, and I'm always kind of like soaking those up whenever Toni Morrison, for example, is like such a crazy story of how she was a single mom to 2 kids and a full-time editor, and she would wake up at 4 a.m. to write. Like I that's supernatural to me, but I'm glad it exists as like a beacon of hope, a like North Star to aspire to. So that's sometimes when I feel like I really don't know what I'm doing or I'm flailing, I like kind of grasp for those stories of women who somehow pulled it off.
Right. That's great. Um, I'd love to ask y'all to talk a little bit about like how you uh how like what strategies in addition to say like the shorter form pieces that Whitney, I believe you mentioned, that y'all have around sort of maintaining a writing practice and an artistic practice, and if there are other sort of rituals or routines that you've built for yourselves since becoming parents that have helped sort of protect and nourish that artistic part of you.
I'll jump in. One thing that's been super helpful for me has been pen and paper journaling, particularly free writing, sort of disconnecting the the craft and the practice of writing from producing something. So, because I had such short time, and granted, I did enjoy working on short pieces because it felt like something I could complete, I could, check off my list. But uh, sometimes I just need to preserve the writer part of me and not the page producer part of me. And so a pen and paper journal where I have a practice of free writing each morning before I start my day, just a few minutes of almost nonsensical free writing that usually spins into something interesting to me, maybe not to someone else. But that's been like a lovely way of sort of keeping the fire alive for myself. In an artistic way, and maybe that's part of it too, is like decoupling this sense of achievement, and I have to complete X, Y, or Z, or produce X, Y, or Z, or do, and then just remind yourself that the act of writing in itself is the fire, and so anything you can do to keep that going during these times, I think, is the most important thing.
I've tried to embrace the Toni Morrison model, not which feels so feels ridiculous and so grandiose to say. I'm just trying to be like Toni Morrison. But I take great inspiration from the fact that she would wake up at 4 a.m. and do a bunch of writing before her day job. And so I do try to do that, not every day, but where I can. And because I find those quiet hours to be the most productive. Now, granted, I have a newborn, so like the 4 a.m. there's like a kid crying next to me. So those are not what they used to be. But he will eventually learn how to sleep through the night, and hopefully I can get those 4 a.m. Spurts back again.
Yes.
To Whitney, like I've always found like pleasure in writing. I've always found it to be really therapeutic regarding just like disappearing into this other world for X amount of time. But I find that I really, really enjoy it now. Okay, you gotta be quiet because I'm having a meeting. Okay. Um, because my life like this is so chaotic that when I really it's not like I took it for granted before, but now when I do get to do it, it's like this balm, like it's just I find it to be superior to anything. And I have no vices anymore in my life. And so it's like that one thing that I get to do where I think is like a, healthy way of like escaping for a while. And so that really keeps me engaged and focused because of what it gives back to me.
Can y'all talk a little bit about like how you found community with other parent artists and like yeah, especially I mean I'm curious to hear well all of you talked about it, but Christina, I know you recently moved and so and I know that like having been here in the Twin Cities for a couple of years, it's a process and it's like I still feel like I'm finding that community. So just curious about how folks are approaching that and finding solidarity and support there.
I just had that conversation with someone the other day. I find it really challenging because, most of my peers like that are the same age as me are like in kind of grandparent like zone almost now. And so I don't really have a lot of parent friends. It's been really difficult. There are two women dynamic Black theater professionals here in New York who I've known for years, and we started a parent support WhatsApp group. So I had was having a really hard time over the summer with like bedtime and stuff, and they're a little bit further down the road than me. And so that's been really helpful. I don't see them that often, but whenever I'm like in a crisis mode, I can just message them and they'll give me feedback based on their own experience and just really help me center myself. And it's been so helpful to me. And I just adore them. They've been such angels for me.
I think my latest MO is to just like have no chill when I feel any sort of connection with a fellow parent. I'm like, here's my number. Please call me whenever you want. I like we can do a play date tomorrow. I don't like it probably comes off as super manic energy, but I just know you gotta like cast a wide net to find your people. And I think it's so contrary to the way I'm aggressively friendly and always on the lookout for like who could be my next mom friend at the park, at the library, and just like trying to be really deliberate about like when can we meet, which eventually inevitably it's gonna have to be canceled 5 times because your kid got sick, then my kid got sick. We don't accounting for all of that, like when can we meet? So I just have no chill and I'm like, if I feel any spark, I'm gonna
That
It's
is
always
so
like really
true.
affirming when like the other parent is as thirsty for it as I am, and I'm just like we we both need this. And also when you then discover that you might have other things in common beyond just being parents. Sorry, Whitney, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I just wanted to second what Christina was saying. That is calling it no chill is much better than like desperation, which is the word that was coming to my mind. But it is true because between your kids sort of shifting in ages and having different interests and then, different overlapping, like I don't go to that daycare anymore. We don't go to that side of town anymore. It's so easy to slip away that you really have to aggressively hunt for your people. And I don't think you need that many for it to really land. I've got like a couple mom friends. Wendy Weckworth is a dear friend of mine, and she has a daughter, and so her friendship is absolutely invaluable. And then I met a woman at my son's dance class who's similarly artistic minded. It's just wonderful. She was like knitting, and I pulled up beside her, and I was like, I like yarn, let's talk, right? And so, and she loved it. She was so ready. And so I don't know. I was like, maybe there's a boldness to it. I think that's rewarded when you're in this phase of your life. And know that just a few really core people, I think, can make a huge difference.
What
I just
is
wanted to add one on to what you've all been saying. And yeah, there is that thing. And I don't know that maybe I've experienced it with other creative people before where or when I meet someone else from Minneapolis and like you just have that instant kind of connection. But there's nothing like the connection that and they could be parents that are 18 or parents who are, 80. Um, you just get it. And yeah, and it can be kind of manic and crazy sometimes, but we're all going through so much intensity that it is really amazing when you have that quick connection and you're like, "Oh my God, I get you. I understand." Because a lot of my friends do not have kids and they just don't understand, So like Pirronne, when we first met on our Zoom, we spent probably 50 minutes out of the hour just comparing notes. I remember.
Totally. I want to join your WhatsApp group also, just FYI.
I feel
Or
like
we
too
can have
that
our own.
there's like a pay it sort of not a pay it forward. I don't know how to describe it. Like until you become a parent, you don't understand how hard it can be. So once you do become a parent and you get through those trenches, I think you're so eager to help the people that are just stepping in. You're like, oh, okay, I've just been there. I know what you need. I'm going to help you, right? We're going to get through this together. I feel like it's that cycle. It's like your friends who don't have kids can't necessarily understand, but the people who are just ahead of you on that journey are so eager to help in the ways that helped them the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Last question, and we're going to sort of lightning round this one. If you were to meet a parent in this moment who's feeling a little bit like they've lost their artistic voice, like that has been sort of subsumed by parenthood and diapers and everything, what, or if you feel like there was a version of you who felt this way, what would you want to say to them? What would you want them to hold on to as they sort of navigate this transition?
I have a lull, so I'm gonna jump in quick before they come and attack me again. I've just kind of reached this stage in the last 6 months. I'm starting to surrender to the fact of, and then maybe there's a name for this, I don't know, it's new to me about there not being a separation. I mean, there always will be a separation between my creative life and my home life. And I was talking about how I purposely keep it separated, but in a way, in a larger way of, looking at things, it's all creation. Like it's all manifestation. It's all making things. And so sometimes when I am just in parent mode for a while and there's nothing else going on and I don't feel inspired, I do get frustrated, but then I also embrace the fact that I'm creating and manifesting on such a high level with the reality of parenting and what that entails that it almost supersedes any other creative endeavor that I can do. And it sometimes I don't look at it that way, but when I have a really great moment of clarity and I can look at it from that bird's eye perspective, it really heals a lot of trauma and wounds and stuff that I have in me regarding my separation from my creative expression.
For me, I think when I when I had a child that was super, super like a little newborn baby, every week felt like a century, And like it felt like I'm gonna be changing diapers forever. I'm never gonna sleep again, right? Everything feels so permanent in that. And it's only with the perspective of looking back, you realize how short that time really was. And so for me, I try to remember that the parenting part of this is finite. It is a chapter, and your love of story, your love of art is at the core of you, and that will reemerge on the other side. Do whatever you can to keep it alive, to keep it fed and nourished, but it is okay if the lid goes on that box until you have navigated this time. And just know that on the other side of it, you're going to have more experiences and richer stories. There's going to be more to draw from, and it is okay to take the time to do what you have to do now just to survive.
I really have nothing else to add. You guys covered it.
Well, and I was
Yeah.
also just realizing it's like 9 your time and you should get some sleep
Ah,
before
fine.
before the night feeding has to happen. But I just want to say thank you all so much for sharing your experiences. Again, like this is by just the very nature of the topic we're discussing. It's vulnerable and I appreciate you being honest in that vulnerability. Um, and I want to thank our attendees for joining us this evening, and for those of you who had questions that you asked. I hope that we were able to offer some insight, some validation and affirmation of what you're experiencing. I also just want to take a moment to do some plugging for the Playwright Center. We have Gina Femia's The Violet Sisters coming up. Followed by Mortals by J.C. Pancratz. Those plays will be in person at the center and then also streaming online for free, so you can watch from wherever you are if you're not in the Twin Cities. And lastly, I do just want to say that the center relies on a dedicated community of supporters to make our work possible. So if you felt inspired to help support amazing artists like Whitney, Cristina, and Nathan here and their childcare needs and making sure that they are paid and compensated well as playwrights, please go to pwcenter.org and click the donate button. No gift is too small, and also no gift is too large. And lastly, I just want to say thank you all again. We really appreciate you joining us. I hope you have a wonderful night and get some sleep, parents. Go tuck your kids in or tuck yourself in and have a great night.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.